The first time I saw him, I thought he was a statue that had learned to blink. It was a Tuesday in late September. The kind of London afternoon that tricks you, sunny enough to leave your jacket unzipped, but with a wind coming off St. James's Park that smelled like rain by 4 o'clock. I was there because my niece, Sophie, had begged me. She was 12, obsessed with the royal family on TikTok, and had saved her pocket money for a year to see the changing of the guard. "Come on, Uncle Mike, it's history," she'd said, rolling her eyes when I groaned. So there I was, leaning against a cold lamppost near the Duke of York's column, watching 1,000 tourists hold their phones above their heads like a sea of praying mantises. The crowd was the usual mix: American families in matching polo shirts, Japanese schoolgirls giggling in a tight cluster, a German couple arguing about a map, and about 40 people who had camped out since dawn just to stand near the gates. Sophie was squeezing my arm. "There! Look, the ones with the bearskin hats." And that's when I saw him. Not the officers. Not the ones with the shiny belts and the horses. Him. The guard standing at the post near the left foot of the statue, the one nobody looks at because he's not moving. The one you glance at, think, "Oh, a guard," and then ignore. But I couldn't stop staring. He was younger than the others, maybe 23. Dark stubble that told you he'd been on his feet since 5 in the morning. His bearskin hat sat slightly crooked, not sloppy, but real, like he'd adjusted it once and never again. And his eyes. Most guards stare straight ahead, into the middle distance, like they're watching a memory. But his eyes moved. Just a little. Just enough. He was watching the crowd. Not the whole crowd. He was watching a crowd. A group of 3 boys, maybe 17 or 18, had pushed their way to the front. They were loud. The kind of loud that isn't excited, it's performative. One of them had a vape. Another kept yelling, "Oi, mate! Smile," at the guards. The tourists around them were starting to shuffle away, giving them space the way people do when they sense something stupid about to happen. Sophie tugged my sleeve. "Uncle, that one's not looking straight." "He's looking at the right thing," I said. And I didn't know why I said it. I just felt it. The guard didn't move his head. Didn't shift his rifle. But something in his posture changed. His shoulders, which had been perfectly square, tilted 1 degree toward the boys. His weight shifted to the balls of his feet. It was so small that if you blinked, you'd miss it. But I saw it. I've been a bouncer. Back in my 20s, at a pub in Manchester called the Crown and Scepter. Ironic, right? You learn to read trouble before it speaks. Trouble doesn't start with a punch. It starts with a group of young men who don't respect the space they're standing in. The boy with the vape took a step closer to the barrier. Then, another. "£10 says he won't even blink," the boy said, loud enough for everyone to hear. His friends laughed. A few tourists laughed too, nervously, because they didn't know what else to do. The guard blinked. Once. Slowly. And then, his eyes found the boys. Not a glare. Not a threat. Just acknowledgement. The way a shepherd looks at a sheep that's wandered too close to a cliff. I felt the air change. Part 2, the rules of the street. Let me tell you something about London tourist spots in September. They're tired. The summer rush is over, but the weather hasn't given up yet. The pavement has that gray, chewed-up look, bubblegum stains, scuff marks from a million shoes, a dried puddle of something that might have been a slushie or might have been worse. The flower sellers near the mall have started packing up early because the light's gone soft. Sophie was filming everything on her phone, but I noticed she'd stopped narrating. She was watching the guard too now. "He's scary," she whispered. "No," I said. "He's serious. There's a difference." The 3 boys were getting bolder. The ringleader, let's call him Vape Boy, had climbed onto the low railing. Not over it, just onto it. 1 foot on the bottom bar, 1 hand on the top. He was pretending to take a selfie, but his camera was pointed at the guard's face. "Go on, then," Vape Boy said. "Do something. I dare you." His friend with the backward baseball cap was filming. The other one, quiet, nervous, the kind who follows because he doesn't know how to say no, kept looking back over his shoulder at the crowd. Here's what most people don't understand about the King's Guard. They're not decorations. They're not actors in a themed restaurant. They are soldiers. Active, trained, armed soldiers who have, in many cases, served in actual wars. The bearskin hat isn't a costume. It's a helmet. The rifle isn't a prop. It's an L85A2, and it's very real. But you wouldn't know that from the way tourists treat them. I've seen people poke them, yell in their faces, hang scarves on their bayonets. Once, I saw a man try to hand one a business card. So when Vape Boy shouted "Oi! Ugly!" directly at the guard, nobody was really surprised. Annoyed, yes. A woman in a red coat pulled her toddler closer. An old man with a walking stick shook his head. But nobody stepped forward. Nobody said stop. Because that's the thing about crowds, isn't it? Everyone assumes someone else will handle it. The guard didn't move. Didn't speak. But his hand, the one not holding the rifle, made a small gesture behind his back. Just a flick of his fingers. 3 short taps against his own belt. I didn't know what it meant. Not then. But 30 seconds later, I did. 2 other guards appeared from behind the statue. Not running. Not even walking fast. Just appearing, the way shadows appear when the sun moves. One was older, with a sergeant's patch and a face like carved wood. The other was younger, maybe the same age as our guard, but with sharper eyes. They didn't go to the boys. They went to the guard. The older one said something too quiet to hear. The guard replied without moving his lips. A conversation happening entirely in jaw muscles and breath. Then, the older one turned. And he looked directly at Vape Boy. Not for long. Just a second. But, in that second, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Vape Boy laughed, but it was smaller now. His foot came off the railing. His phone dipped toward his chest. "Whatever, mate," he muttered. But he set it to the ground. The 2 backup guards melted back into the crowd. And our guard, the young one with the crooked hat, returned to his stillness. But now I noticed something. The tourists closest to him had stopped being tourists. They weren't filming anymore. They were standing differently. Shoulders back. Chins up. Like they were on his side without knowing why. A man in a suit, city worker, late for something, had stopped walking. He was just watching. Not the palace. The guard. Sophie whispered, "He didn't even shout." "He didn't need to," I said. Part 3, the cracks in the pavement. Here's where the story changes. Because if it ended there, if the boys just got bored and left, it would be a nice little observation about respect. But that's not what happened. 20 minutes later, the crowd had thinned. The changing of the guard was over. The band had marched away, and the horses had clattered off toward the barracks. Most tourists were drifting toward the park or the tube station, clutching their overpriced souvenir mugs and their slightly blurry photos. Sophie wanted to leave too. "I'm hungry, Uncle Mike. Can we get a pretzel?" "In a minute," I said. "I want to see something." I wanted to see him change shifts. I don't know why. Maybe because I used to work doors, and I know that the hardest part of any watch isn't the middle, it's the handover. That moment when you're supposed to relax but your body hasn't caught up yet. When the adrenaline drains out and leaves you hollow. He was still there. Still standing. Still watching. The boys were gone. But a new situation was brewing. Near the gate, an elderly woman had collapsed. Not dramatically, no fainting, no gasping. She just sort of folded. Like a paper bag losing its shape. She was sitting on the pavement with her back against the railing, her face the color of old milk. Her husband, a frail man in a flat cap, was trying to help her up, but his hands were shaking too badly. People were walking around them. Not because they were cruel. Because they were in a hurry. Because they assumed someone else would help. Because in London, you learn to look past the person on the ground. I started moving toward her. So did two other people, a nurse off duty, you could tell by her shoes, and a teenager who looked like he was about to be sick. But we all stopped. Because the guard had moved. Not fast. Not dramatic. He just stepped off his post. One foot, then the other. He glided toward the woman. His rifle stayed at his side, barrel down, safe. His bearskin hat brushed a low branch and he didn't flinch. The crowd parted. Not because he asked them to. Because he was moving with that quiet authority that says, I know what I'm doing, and you should let me. He knelt. Right there on the dirty pavement. In his dress uniform. On knees that had been locked for 2 hours. He didn't ask, are you okay? That's a stupid question when someone's clearly not. He asked, what's your name, love? The woman blinked up at him. Margaret, she whispered. Margaret, he repeated, like it was the most important word in the world. Margaret, I'm Tom. You're going to be fine. You just got a bit dizzy. Has this happened before? She nodded weakly. My heart. The nurse pushed through. I'm a nurse. Let me check her pulse. The guard, Tom, didn't argue. Didn't assert authority. He just shifted to the side, made room, and kept his hand under Margaret's elbow. Steadying her. Not holding her. There's a difference. The husband was crying. Silent tears running down his stubbled cheeks. I told her not to walk so far, he kept saying. I told her. Tom looked up at him. You did good bringing her here, he said. There's help now. You did good. And that's when I understood. He wasn't just helping an old woman. He was holding a space for her husband to not fall apart. He was doing 2 jobs at once, the practical and the human, and he was doing both without breaking a sweat. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. 7 minutes where Tom stayed on his knees, talking to Margaret about her grandchildren, about the weather, about nothing and everything. The nurse checked her vitals. Someone brought a bottle of water. A teenager held up a jacket to block the wind. And, not once did Tom look at his watch. Not once did he check if his relief had arrived. Not once did he act like he had anywhere more important to be. When the paramedics lifted Margaret onto the stretcher, she reached out and touched his face. Just a brush of her fingers against his cheek. You're a good boy, she said. Tom smiled. It was the first time I'd seen his teeth. Just doing my job, Margaret. But it wasn't. We all knew it wasn't. Part 4, the replacement. His replacement arrived 10 minutes late. A younger soldier, barely 20, with a fresh haircut and boots that hadn't been broken in yet. He looked nervous. He kept glancing at Tom like he expected to be yelled at. Tom stood up. His knees cracked. There was a wet stain on the knee of his trousers from the pavement. His bearskin hat was slightly more crooked now. You're late, Tom said. Sorry, Corporal. There was an issue with I'm sorry. Tom looked at him for a long moment. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. Just a small one. A tired one. It's fine, Davies, he said. We've all been there. Just text next time, yeah? Don't make me stand here wondering if you've been hit by a bus. Davies blinked. You're not angry? I'm hungry, Tom said. And my feet hurt. That's not the same as angry. He clapped the younger man on the shoulder. You've got this. The old lady near the left pillar, her name is Margaret. She's on her way to the hospital, but her husband is still over there by the gate. Keep an eye on him. He's scared. Davies nodded, standing taller. And Davies? Tom said, already walking away. Yeah. The kids with the vape. They'll be back tomorrow. Don't react. Just breathe. They're not your enemy. They're just bored. I watched Tom walk toward the barracks. He wasn't strutting. He wasn't exhausted either. He was just a guy. A tired, hungry guy in a fancy hat, walking with a slight limp because his left knee had been on wet concrete for too long. Sophie tugged my hand. Uncle, why did he help her? That's not his job, is it? I thought about it. About all the bouncers I'd worked with who thought authority meant shouting. About the managers who thought respect came from a nameplate. About the people I'd met with fancy titles who couldn't hold a room if their life depended on it. Because he's not a guard, I said finally. He's a person who happens to be wearing a uniform. Sophie frowned. That doesn't make sense. It will, I said. When you're older. But, even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed myself. Because here's the truth, Tom wasn't special because he helped Margaret. He was special because he helped her and, then, didn't stick around for the thanks. He helped her and, then, went back to being a footnote in other people's vacation photos. He inspired loyalty not because he had stripes on his sleeve, although he did, I noticed later, 3 of them. He inspired loyalty because when the moment came, he knelt in the dirt. And, because when his replacement showed up late and, scared, he said it's fine and, meant it. I've worked for bosses who demanded respect. I've known CEOs who required a certain tone of voice. I've met pastors who insisted on being called reverend. And, I've watched them all crumble the second something went wrong, because they had titles but, no spine. Tom had a crooked hat and, a tired smile and, a knee that was going to ache for 3 days. And, every single person who saw him that afternoon, the nurse, the teenager, the husband, even vape boy from a distance, would have followed him into a fire if he'd asked. Not because he ordered it. Because he'd already shown them what he was made of. Part 5, what stayed behind we didn't leave right away. Sophie wanted to see the horses, so we walked toward the park. But, I kept looking back. Not at the palace, at the spot where Tom had been. The new guard, Davies, was standing straight now. Shoulders back. Eyes forward. But, every few seconds, his gaze would flick to the old man by the gate. Margaret's husband, sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. And, then, I saw Davies do something small. He shifted his position. Just a few inches. Enough so that his body was angled toward the old man. Not facing him, that would have been weird. Just, present. A silent promise that said I see you. He learned that in 10 seconds. From a man who didn't yell at him for being late. The sun was starting to set. The gold on the palace windows turned orange, then pink, then gray. The crowd thinned to nothing. A street sweeper came by, pushing a broom in wide, tired arcs. Sophie was eating a pretzel. Uncle, do you think he'll be famous? Who? Tom? Yeah. Do you think anyone will write about him? I almost laughed. Almost. But, then, I thought about it. About all the small, invisible acts of decency that happen every day in a city of 9 million people. About the paramedics who don't make the news. About the teachers who stay late. About the crossing guards who know every kid's name. No, I said. I don't think anyone will write about him. And, I don't think he'd want them to. Sophie wiped salt off her lips. That's sad. Is it? I asked. He saved someone today. He taught a kid how to be better. And, he went home with sore knees and, a story he'll probably never tell. That's not sad, Sophie. That's most of the good in the world. She was quiet for a long time. Then, she said, I want to be like that when I grow up. Like what? Like someone who doesn't need a title. I put my arm around her shoulders. The wind had picked up again, and the rain was finally, here, soft at first, then, steady. The palace lights came on, one by one, like hesitant stars. You already are, I said. And I meant it.